there everyone, and welcome back to another Minecraft video! My name is Shells, and we are once again in my Legend of Alex terraining world. And today we're going to be turning this ugly gray stone into a beautiful landscape. And to do that, we're going to be doing a whole lot of painting and texturing. Now, I'm going to go ahead and apologize in advance for if I seem a little bit scatterbrained this episode. I have a newborn at home, and I may be just a little bit sleep deprived because of it. But I'm going to do my best here, and hopefully I can come up with something cohesive. Now to start off with, we're actually going to be here in my super flat testing world. And the reason that we're doing this is we're actually going to be making some tileable textures. I already made this big grass one specifically for putting into my castle town, but I'm planning on using this for most of Hyrule Field as well. And I'm going to go ahead and show you how I made this and what the plan is with it. So the purpose of having a tileable design like this is that I can cover a large area with basically a basic texture that then I don't have to individually paint, and I can go through and later change some of the textures in certain areas and make it a little bit less predictable. But the idea is that I have this selection copied, and then I can do a replace command, and I can say, you know, replace the sandstone with hashtag clipboard. You've seen me do this before in a couple of times, but what World Edit does is it makes it so that way if it's tileable, then it blends from one square of it to the other seamlessly, and you can't really see where the lines are for where it's tiling. Now if you get a large enough area, you can begin to see predictable patterns being implemented into it. But this is the general idea, is that then I can take this, what's now flat, and put it on a textured terrain and be able to end up with something a little bit more interesting than just having flat grass. Now real quickly here, I'd like to kind of demonstrate how to make a tileable texture. So what you're going to do is, say this is your base texture here. What you end up doing is laying out your main square and then putting other squares on top. So then this one would represent the bottom half there. The one on the bottom would then be representative of this section here. And then on this side, likewise, you'd end up with that. And over here, you'd end up with that. And what you'd end up doing is you color kind of outside the lines here, and then copy that, paste it over here. And then similarly, draw whatever you draw over here, you copy here, paste over here. And so on and so forth. You do that down here and up here as well. That way you can have your design kind of flow one section into the other section and not have awkward lines in between. Obviously what World Edit does is it has a thing where it kind of just tiles things automatically when you do the replace with clipboard command. So that way, that's the whole reason for having the tileable design. And so we're going to be making a whole bunch of these tileable designs, not just this one, but also for things like the stone and granite and etc, etc. To demonstrate what I mean, I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate one of my tileable textures with you. So the one I'm going to do here is I'm going to be doing the rock sort of texture for Death Mountain. I really wanted some more of these reddish hues, like with granite, but as you can see, just laid out flat, granite's kind of ugly. And looking at pictures of Death Mountain, it's actually got more of a tannish hue than I had originally thought. So I want this gradient to be very, very subtle. I don't want it to stand out horribly much. And I'm just going to make almost a marbled design, and I'll go ahead and do that with you here. So here I've got a whole bunch of brushes pre-prepared. All of these just correlate with the stripped jungle wood, the mushroom block, packed mud, granite, dripstone, acacia. So I'm just going to be generally painting here, and I'll go ahead and blend these later. I just want to get the actual general colors done. So we're just going to make a couple of oblong shapes like that, try to make it look nice-ish. I've got a G mask on to granite, so that's the only color I can actually affect right at the moment, and I'm just going to make little shapes like this, and basically everything is fading to granite. Granite is my gold thing, so then I'll also make a couple of darker shapes as well as the lighter shapes here. Alright, so now that I've got some very, very basic shapes laid out here, what I can go ahead and do, I went ahead and marked out the center spots and the corners, just temporarily, so that way I can actually line things up and measure them properly. What I can do is I can go ahead and grab this corner and go up to the center point over here. And what we can do then is copy this and paste it up above on the upper hand. You notice that I only did the bottom half here for the most part, the bottom and the middle, and that's so that way I can actually start to make the top part line up with the bottom part. So I'll show you what I mean. So I'm gonna go ahead and copy it, the whole bottom section here, from this point. So copy, and we're going to paste it up over here. So since I was standing on that block, we're gonna put it right here on this block. So we're gonna say paste. So boom, now we've got that half of that iteration up here, and then we're going to go ahead and do a little bit of doodling. And what we can do is the same thing, just making more shapes, but specifically going over this line and into this area here. And then what I can go ahead and do is I can take this section here that I've gone ahead and painted just now, and I can copy it and repaste it onto the bottom section down here. And from here I can do the exact same thing on the left hand side and the right hand side. Now I'm going to go ahead and point out that because I ended up touching the bottom edge here on this section, I now have to copy this and redo that little section and make sure that that blends properly. So yeah, you kind of have to make sure that you avoid the edges of sides you're not working on currently if you're going to be doing this method, or else you have to kind of redo some spots. So let me go ahead and fix that. Alright, I think at this point I pretty well have a tileable design. Now you notice I only had to do one side there and one side there. I didn't have to completely surround it. So I think that should be sufficient. I think at this point, if I were to copy this tile and do the replace command, then it would work just fine. Now, of course, I haven't gone in and actually made any of this more, I haven't done the gradient properly at this point. So that would be my next step, but that's the general gist of how to make this work. And now here we have the finished product of what we were creating before. I went ahead and grabbed it and put it up on a vertical scale, since most of Death Mountain is going to be well, vertical. It makes more sense to have the design on a vertical platform. But yeah, and you can obviously see I changed around all of the colors of the blocks I was using. I tend to do that a lot with gradients. I come up with something and then I go, I don't like that. And then I completely redo it a number of times. Even this one is not perfect and I have things that I'd rather see different about it. One of the things that's always annoyed me is the fact that I really like the texture and color of ancient debris on this side, but the moment you look at the top, it turns into this ugly, crunchy cinnamon roll texture, and there's no way to hide it. So I almost need to make a data pack to make it translate onto the floor here, because, yeah, that's not as pleasant to walk on. So this texture over here is literally just a recolor of that. Maybe a couple more stages in the gradient added in here and there, but it's basically a recolor. And it just goes to show the difference between having a good working gradient and a gradient that has some blocks that are missing. This one just looks so much more flat compared to this one. This one almost looks like it's like a rippling curtain. It's kind of cool. But I already know what the problematic texture is for this one, and it is actually the dripstone. My dripstone here is actually ruining this entire gradient, but there isn't another block that has a good transition between granite and the ancient debris. So, goes to show the difference between a good gradient and a not so great gradient, which is a bit unfortunate there. Over here I went ahead and finished up the terracotta, the mesa biome sort of texture here. I originally had the colors a lot brighter and I actually had to dull them down afterwards because comparing it to my Death Mountain texture I was like, whoo, that was way too bright. But I think it works out okay. It's a bit on the busy side, but I kind of like it. So we'll see how it does when I actually put it into the world. Now, I'll be the first one to admit that one of my biggest worries with these textures is that they're going to be a little bit too busy. And the reason I'm really worried about that is just because this is the terrain we're talking about. It's supposed to be flat. And yes, I have an awful lot of gradients in my build, but if everything has too heavy of gradients, it's just going to make the entire world look really, really busy. So just as a little test here, I'm going to go ahead and paint in some of my stone texture onto the back of Lake Hylia here and see how I like it. It should be simple enough to change back if I hate it. So I've gone ahead and got the schematic already loaded up onto my brush. For those of you who are wondering what the command is, this is what it is. Just, you know, basic sphere. It's hashtag clipboard because that's what's got my schematic on it. Now what I need to do is I need to make sure I have a mask on this that is exclamation point A or air. And the reason for this is it's basically saying masking everything except air. So means I can paint on all of this and not color the air. And so then when I click on this it should, haha, see? So this is my texture suddenly being implemented onto that. Now so far from what I can tell, it doesn't look too bad. Oh yeah, you can really see it working on this wall that I've got the orientation actually correct on. Yeah, that actually looks really cool in my opinion. So I'm really happy with this particular texture. Alright, so the next texture I want to try out here is going to be my Mesa biome or Badlands biome texture. I'll admit I'm a little bit worried about this one, but let's see how it goes. So far, so good. Ooh yeah, get those stripies in there. Okay. Of course, it's going to look really weird on all of the flat surfaces, but for the walls, it should be fine. There, I don't think that's too bad. I actually quite like it. I think it's a bit more subtle than what you get in the standard vanilla Minecraft for the Badlands biome, so Yeah, I think I'm happy with that. And final test here with the Death Mountain texture. Ooh, apparently I need to get a little bit closer. I'm at the edge of render distance. Yeah. There we go. Alright. Yeah, I honestly don't think that that's too bad. It looked really, really flat on just the flat wall, but I think it does all right on Death Mountain itself. So, alright. I still wish the dripstone was just a little bit darker. I'm almost tempted to... I'm going to be having to add a data pack to this anyway. And I'm kind of tempted to make the data pack maybe drop the value of dripstone just a hair. And this, my friends, is what we call cheating. Yeah, that's right. I cheated. I ended up going into a resource pack and changing the color of dripstone. Honestly, I find dripstone to be frustrating to use because if it was just a little bit more saturated and a little bit darker, it would match with so many things a lot nicer than it does. So yes, I went and changed it. So there. And while I'm messing with resource packs, I went ahead and changed the top of the ancient debris and got rid of the stupid cinnamon roll texture and replaced it with this instead. So there. Ha! Just to really emphasize the difference between vanilla and my resource pack, here is vanilla, and there's the new resource pack there. Oh yeah. That makes this texture so much better. I am much happier with that as a Death Mountain. So unless you guys really hate the fact that I'm not sticking with vanilla for this, I'm probably going to just add that change to dripstone into my texture pack here. Because, yeah, this looks so much better. Oh, that's why this looks strange. My mushroom blocks got all messed up. Alright, I'll have to fix that. So I went ahead and also made myself a sand texture that I'll need for the desert. Now, I'm sure you've noticed that I've just used exactly the same texture that I've used for the granite and the stone. Honestly, I wasn't expecting to use the exact same texture, just recolored a bunch of times, but I'm lazy, so there, ha. I might change up one or more of those, I don't know. I think my main issue with this sand texture, though, is that in order to get the texture to actually work, the gradient here, I had to use these beehive blocks, which while they look alright from the top, they have the beehive texture on the bottom, and that's going to look really silly on the dunes, I'm not gonna lie. But then again, I'm also using bone blocks, which also have the same sort of issue. And with that, I think it's about time that we start actually painting this gray, ugly world into something a little bit more beautiful. Alright, at this point I'm a little bit at a loss for what to do. As you can see, anytime I'm coloring the very tops of these, the texture just turns really, really terrible. I know that there is a command that lets you basically overlay on any flat surfaces, or mostly flat surfaces, and I could overlay like terracotta. But that does require doing a lot of selections of large areas and trying to make it work. And I did try to select the entire desert and turn it into sand at one point, and it crashed my game. So I'm a little bit hesitant to do that again. And the other solution is to go through and hand paint in terracotta, but as you can see, just plain terracotta tends to clash with the very textured sides. And I was experimenting with trying to add in, just basically being lazy and not having to make another texture all over again. I was trying to make a brush that, had 70% terracotta, 25% the red terracotta, and other varying things to try, and overall I haven't really liked any of my results so far, so I'm not really sure what to do about the tops of my mesa biome here. Yes, I'm painting with this one. It almost feels like it's a little bit too textured, but I'm not really sure what to do different. So I'm just going to use this for now and leave it. It's better than flat terracotta at the very least. Now I will say, from down here, this mesa biome is looking amazing. But coming up above, it becomes pretty obvious where I've used my flat texture. Also, I somehow screwed up my tileable design and have like a line running through it occasionally. Whoopsies. I think I know what I did wrong there, but I'm almost wondering if I should go through and soften some of this flat texture, because it's really kind of not great. The other thing I'm wondering is, how far should I actually extend the painting of the mesa here? Should I bring it all the way down to Lake Hylia? I almost think that's a little bit too much, but I'm not really sure what to do instead. Something I could do is start introducing almost like a savanna, where I put in grasslands here instead, and then have occasionally these rocks and such be the same mesa biome stuff. I'm kind of leaning towards that option because I think that some of this just looks kind of bad. It's too flat for having this texture, and I might even add in some of the grass on top of this. I'm not entirely sure yet. So I almost wonder if this command will do what I want it to. Let me just make sure that my mask is on. And let's see if this will kind of soften the blow a little bit. Maybe a little. But I'll admit it's not really doing exactly what I wanted it to. Maybe if I change the percentages around a little. Here, let me try maybe 75-25. Let's try that. Okay. That might be a little bit better. So I think I might go over some of it. It's just a little bit scattered, is something that I worry about, but it's maybe a little bit easier on the eyes than how harsh the texture is otherwise. There. It's a little bit less obvious that I just used a big texture, though it's still pretty obvious, I'm not gonna lie. But it's better, and I think I'm just gonna leave it here. From the surface, it's actually not too bad, which is one of the reasons I think I'm just going to leave it. Is because when you're actually walking on it, it's not obvious. It's only when you're flying through the air, and how often are we going to be flying through the air? And with that, I think Gerudo Valley, this region, is pretty well done, the Gerudo Highlands and what have you. I still need to go through and paint the entire desert, but I figure that's monotonous enough that I'm going to just leave it and move on to more interesting things. But yeah, it's looking pretty good, I think, so I'm happy with it. we'll see what you guys think of it in the comments. I'm going to go ahead and move on and start painting Death Mountain, and then I'll get up to painting in some of the grass. So while I've been working on Death Mountain here, I've kind of noticed that my build's lacking a little bit in depth. It does look a little bit like I just hydro-dipped the entirety of Death Mountain here, which unfortunately isn't really the effect I want. I almost need it to be darker towards the bottom here. I think the best route to doing this is if I had a brush that could just do, you know, the 90% making the darker blocks, but then be able to leave what's currently there alone. And I'm not really sure how to actually make a brush that'll do that for me, unfortunately. So I'm gonna have to play with a couple of things until I get something that I actually like. Now, one thing I could do is I could take the same method that I used to kind of divide up the texture for the terracotta and basically use percentages. So for this brush, I've got the percentage of 75% clipboard, 10% dripstone, 10% ancient debris, and then 5% the soul soil. Unfortunately, I can't really control like an actual gradient with it. What it does is it just kind of randomizes it, and it looks a little bit like acne when I do this. But it's not the worst, but I noticed it's only darkening it so much here. I almost, yeah, I'll probably have to up the percentages of the darker blocks if I were to do this. And mostly what it's doing is just adding a whole lot of noise to it. The other method I'd really like to try out is one that GeminiTay has in a tutorial video that she made, and I'm actually going to create a link to that tutorial video in the description, so go ahead and watch that. I'd highly recommend you do so. And basically what it is it's what she calls it is a gradient brush, and what she's doing is she builds her own gradient in a big sphere, copies it, saves it as a schematic, and then is able to paint with that. And I'm going to go ahead and give that a try and see if I can get it to work for me. Alright, let's give this a go. Oh, it's kind of changing stuff. If it's working, it's very, very subtle. Perhaps I need to remove some of the lighter colored blocks and just have the darker ones. Okay, so I went ahead and did what I did before, but I actually made my gradient brush darker. I even added some of the gray terracotta blocks to make it the gradient even darker than what's up there. And that seems to be working better, but I can't help but notice that it is still very, very textured. Just, it's a little bit too random, and it's making my gradient really, really messy. It's less noticeable on the ground, but more noticeable when I'm up in the air, and I'm not sure how thrilled I am about it. So I think the problem that I'm having is that I keep wanting to have darker spots in the crevices of Death Mountain and then lighter spots on the top. But of course, as I'm making this, especially as I take my darker brush here and bring it over the top of some of these lighter areas, it's making the speckled effect. So I almost wonder if I need to just kind of restart the texture and just completely paint Death Mountain from scratch and just try to basically create my own accents and stuff like that. So this is kind of a bit of a crude method I've got going here, where I've got basically a gradient in all of my brushes here, slowly making its way up, so I can kind of just paint what I'm wanting. It's not the most precise though, so I'll go back and try to fix up some of the gradients afterwards, but I think this is going to be, in the long run, a lot less frustrating than what I was doing before, and I think it'll make it for some much smoother results in the end, so that's the hope. Well, after several hours of working very, very hard to basically paint Death Mountain, I have it most of the way done. I wouldn't consider this 100% done, because I'm sure I will continue to mess with it here and there for quite some time now. But ta-da! Look at it, isn't it beautiful and glorious? Now here's a little bit of an admission to you. I actually had about 3.5 hours worth of footage or so that was just me painting all of this Death Mountain. And I lost it. Yeah, it's gone. It wasn't usable. And I apologize. What I should have done is I should have had replay mod going, and I didn't. And that turned out to be a big mistake. So you don't get to see me paint Death Mountain. I'm really sorry. I think at this point the main thing I want to get done is actually focus on doing more of the area around Death Mountain. I did try to just leave some of the base texturing from the tileable texture I had, and I just wasn't happy with it. There were too many spots where it was like bright on the side facing away from my light. So the way I've been doing all of this is I've been kind of picturing that my light source is coming from the southeast over here. And so on the western slopes, I've been making them darker. Well, sorry, not western. The northwestern, mostly northern slopes, I've been making them a lot darker, and then trying to make the southern slopes a lot lighter. And that's pretty well how I've been manually going through and shading all of this. So you can see here, darker side, lighter side. And when I had just the base texture on, it just looked really super flat and awkward. Like I was trying to add a gradient, but didn't actually know what I was doing. And you can see I'm not done yet. There are points like this where, yeah, that's too bright. So I can go through and be like, yeah, you all need to be much, much darker, because actually this should be more of a core shadow area down here. And so I've been slowly painting the landscape here, adding more details and making it overall much more interesting to look at. Now I will point out one major flaw with using a resource pack, and this is why I generally don't use resource packs ever. And that is for the simple reason of if someone doesn't use your resource pack, what looks great normally suddenly tends to look a little bit like garbage otherwise. You keep in mind, the only block I changed was dripstone, but boy does it make a difference. Like, yeah, it's still alright, but it's pretty gross without the resource pack, I gotta say. And then of course, you know, cinnamon rolls all over the place. So, yeah, at this point, I've kind of committed to using the resource pack, because there is no block to really replace the dripstone with, and with how much work I've put into Death Mountain, I'm not reverting it back. But, yeah, I don't know. Moving on from Death Mountain stuff, I think the next thing I need to address is actually going to be how I'm going to make grass. And while I did make this for making the castle town, I find that it's going to be a little bit busy, seeing as how this ended up performing in the actual world. I can already tell that this is going to be way too much to have it constantly gradiating to the darker colors here. So what I have in mind is I can still keep this as a texture I can use, but I'm going to actually make an identical one. I'm going to copy and paste this and change some of the colors around, so that way this can easily transition into a more base coat of texture. There we go. That's much more manageable. And with our grass textures made, we can now begin to paint our landscapes green. Alright, so I've basically covered most of the southern half of the entire map here. Now, I have to point out a couple of things. First and foremost, these cliff sides. Um, I... This is something, an actual flaw with the actual mountain itself. I think I used the smooth ball thing a little bit too much. You can see how rounded the edges of the cliffs are, and this applies to all of the cliffs, and I was really struggling to try to figure out where to put grass and where to put rock. This is a prime example. Like, I could put grass going all the way up that, but then you get less of the variance in texture. When you're making cliffs, a lot of times you need to have more of a flat surface for grass, and then a very definite line where there's a vertical surface for rock, and then another flat surface for grass. And I just don't have that on any of these cliffs. And I'm really kind of struggling here. This is definitely where I wish I knew how to better create these cliffs so that way I could make it a little bit nicer. Like I could have this grass dip down a little bit. I almost wonder if something that I could do to sort of fix this is if I manually create almost a lip over the top, but then that runs the risk of just looking terrible as well. I'm not sure what the right answer is for that. As it is, the cliffs look very much painted on, which that's exactly what they are. That's paint. I painted on some rocks is what went on here. And yeah, I'm not really sure how to address this, so for the moment I won't. The second issue comes in the form of biomes. You can see how my grass texture has changed over here. This is because when I made this world in World Painter, I put rough estimates of where I wanted different biomes to be and just plopped them in. I'm going to change some of the borders around, but the fact of the matter is I still want there to be different biomes. Now where this darker grass is going to be, that's where I want the Lost Woods to be. And it's supposed to surround a jungle biome in the very center where I'm actually going to put the Wind Temple. Now the issue is that the dark grass looks terrible with this existing coloring that I have for the grass. I'm almost wondering if I need to create a separate texture specifically for the dark oak woods. And then similarly, I would want to have a different texture for the jungle biome. And then the third grass texture I really need to address is something that fades into more of like the mesa biome and the Death Mountain biome. Because as it is, I think having this really bright grass going straight into that stuff, it's just going to look horribly unnatural and awful. And on the topic of transitioning to the mesa biome, what am I going to do about this little gem? I have the rock running straight into where I want to have the mesa biome begin here. And I'm really not sure what to do here. They clash horribly. There's no good way to actually transition this. I'm almost wondering if I need to bring the Lake Hylia rock further this way, but the problem is as I come over this direction I get straight into my actual Gerudo Valley here, and I really don't want to get rid of the mesa biome for this area specifically right here, this gap, and there's no good spacing in this area for me to actually change that. I am thinking I can add some of my brown grass onto the ground level here, but at what point do I taper off Lake Hylia rock and turn it into mesa? How do I go about doing that? That's honestly one of the big reasons I've pretty well left this entire section untouched. I think for this I want there to be the rocks and the stones that are going to be mesa biome rocks, and then put grass, preferably a brown version of the grass down below. I'll probably turn this area into a savanna biome to do it, and then maybe put some grass on top. That should hopefully make this place more interesting, but definitely different than over there. So looking at this, if I were to put a dividing point between Lake Hylia Rock and Mesa Rock, I think the point to do it is actually right here. Wonder if maybe what I do is, since this is angled this way, if I bulge that out just a sliver, then I could have a defining point where Lake Hylia Rock ends and Mesa Rock begins. And then I'm going to definitely be putting in the actual grass texture over here. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Alright, so I really want to address this problem where the biome is changing. You can see that I have the savanna biome covering this entire hillside, but the dark green is just really clashing with that lighter color. And ideally I'd like it to come to more of like a yellowish, brownish color. So I've been experimenting with the color palette stuff, and I haven't made up my mind on any of this. Yeah, I tried a whole bunch of stuff. Turns out I hate all of it. Just leaving it like this was actually better, though I might add more of the patches, the brown patches, like what I have over there. There. It's an imperfect solution, but it is a solution nonetheless. This still looks visually better than just leaving it as pure bright green grass. It does get a little bit dark in places, but I think it actually lends itself to blending better into the actual mesa biome here. Alright, next biome I really want to fix is this dark forest biome. I really like having the darker grass, but the rest of it is just too bright. Unfortunately there aren't that many dark green blocks in the game, and can I just talk about the tragedy that is the stark white lines Mojang decided to add to their darkest green block in the game? Why? Why have you done this? Well, that's what resource packs are for. There. That makes me feel much better now. Alright, so I have an experimental little patch here of replacing some of the blocks. I didn't really want to replace either the green concrete or the green terracotta, though I'm thinking the green concrete might still have to go. I'm not a big fan of putting leaves on the ground because they are slightly transparent, but I think it works alright, especially since this is going to be the Lost Woods and your visibility is going to be low anyway. So yeah, I think that will do. Let me experiment with replacing the green concrete with something else though. I'm not sure I like that. Alright, I like that. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and go through and paint over the spots I want with this texture, and then I'll try to actually blend it a little bit more with the proper texture after I've got the big sections done. Uh-oh, I just remembered the problem with using too many leaves. Lag. Lag. Oh no, the lag is real. Oh no, what do I do? Do I change all the leaves back? Oh, that's so sad. Well, that's a bit of a shame, and it does not bode well for my trees. Oh well. I think I'm gonna leave as many of the ones in the Lost Woods as I can, but everything in the jungle has got to go. Ding dong, the lag is gone. Which old lag, that icky lag? Ding dong, the icky lag is gone. Alright, you'd think that for a block as simple as leaves it would cause less lag, but alas. You can see it's still, as I approach the Lost Woods here, I'm definitely getting back into lag land. I don't know what to do about that. Well that's unfortunate. I noticed that my green concrete powder was starting to sink in places, so I tried to run a smooth brush over it to fix it, and a sinkhole opened up into my ground. I think they have a bunch of hollow space under here. Yep, that's exactly what's down here. Uh-oh. There. No one will ever know anything went wrong. So something I've been doing here is, as I've been approaching Death Mountain, I've had the grass texture run right up against it, but then what I've been doing is changing it to be the same gradient as in these little patches that I've got here. It does use the path block, which is a little bit unfortunate, but it seems to work alright. So then I just basically run through the spots I want to change. That one didn't change much, and then I just basically doing a recolor of the blocks where I want it to go. And that seems to be working okay. It's not the best, and it still leaves some green patches, but I think that's fine. Definitely the messiest area as far as changing the rock textures and biomes goes. It's right here where Death Mountain kind of meets up with Zora's Domain. That maybe could have been worked out a little bit better, because, yeah, I'm kind of struggling with this one. I'm trying to divide the two rock textures with patches of grass, but in some cases I don't know where the grass is going to go and where it should end, because I do want most of this to be, you know, Death Mountain-y stuff. So do I just have a little tiny patch of grass randomly right here? I guess so. Haha! We have done it! We have completely covered the entire countryside with grass. So now the thing I want to do is, while I did layer in some basic spots where I put stone and such, especially around Zora's Domain, I've noticed that my rock texture has the same problem that Death Mountain had, where the gradient doesn't actually match with the contours of the land, and it looks really funny. It gets really awkwardly stripy in places. So the last thing I'm going to actually do is go ahead and basically retexture all of the stone areas of this. And this time I'm actually going to be smart and use replay mods, that way you can see me do it a little bit here. So with that, let us get started! Alright, so Zora's Domain is officially done over here. I went ahead and did all of these rock formations all the way around Zora's Domain, including around the riverbank, until I reached about where the location where Kakariko Village would be and the entrance to Lost Woods. And at this point, I'm not sure how much I want to continue my lighting convention further that way, because that is an awful lot of work to actually manually modify each of these rocks. I might try to get some major ones done. You can see I have some awkward locations like this one that could be cleaned up. But I might leave some of these rocks over here, especially the ones in the distance. But for now, I think I'm going to call this project finished. I've pretty well covered the entire map with paint. And to be honest, I'm quite happy with the way it has turned out. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up my video here. So what did you guys think? Was it interesting watching me paint the world? It sure took me a lot longer than I thought it would, but I think it's overall turned out quite nicely. And of course I'm going to be cleaning up places here and there, but I'm really happy with how it's turned out, and I hope that you guys feel the same. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Goodbye!